Hello, welcome back to Sow, Grow and Cook. We've got visitors coming for the weekend, and although I've got a loaf of bread here, I know these visitors love their toast. So I'm going to be doing some more bread baking, and I'm going to use my surplus goat's milk in the recipe. Now don't worry if you don't have goat's milk, you can use regular cow's milk, or I think you could even use plant-based milk in this recipe as well. So, do you really need to use milk when you're making bread? No, you can use water, flour, salt and yeast. That's all you really need to use to make bread. However, if you have got a surplus of milk, like I do, you might want to find a way of using it up. The other thing is, milk imparts a richness to baked bread, and it also makes a softer crumb. So it has some lovely advantages if you do use milk in your bread. Let's take a look at our ingredients. I've got 1 kilogram of bread flour. Now I'm going to use half white bread flour and half malted brown flour, but you can have all white bread flour, or you can have all brown bread flour, or you can have all wholemeal flour. Although if you use 100% wholemeal flour, you could get quite a heavy loaf, which is why I tend to use a split, which if you use the white bread flour, it just tends to lighten it a bit. We have got our 700 milliliters of goat's milk, that's 24 fluid ounces. If you don't have goat's milk, which I expect many of you won't, go ahead and use cow's milk or a plant-based milk. You'll need to warm it up just before you mix it into your flour though. So we'll be doing that shortly. And moving on, we've got some dry fast action yeast, and that's 2 1/4 teaspoon and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And that's just ordinary table salt. And the equipment I've got today is just a wooden spoon, a plastic dough scraper, which you don't have to have, but I find it quite useful, and 2 loaf tins, which are the 2-pound size. And we'll grease those when we shape the dough and put it in for its second or final proving. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so because I've mixed my flour, I've got half white bread flour and half malted bread flour, malted wheat bread flour. I'm going to stir everything up first to make sure it's all mixed well. Now I'm going to add all the dry ingredients, which is basically just the yeast and the salt. Stir those in well. Okay, now it's time to add your milk. Now I have warmed this milk in the microwave for about a minute until it's warm. It's kind of body temperature. I can dip my pinky, which is clean by the way, I've washed my hands quite thoroughly, and the milk is quite warm, but it's not hot because you don't really want to kill the yeast at this stage. So I'm going to pour some of that in and give the flour and the yeast and the milk a good stir. I need to add some more. Make sure you get right to the bottom of the bowl. And add a bit more. In fact, I'm going to add all of it now. Now this is where I find a dough scraper is quite useful. You can scrape the flour and dough mixture off your wooden spoon, and now use your dough scraper to turn and fold your ingredients in. So turn your bowl, scrape and fold into the middle. I'm just feeling that. I think that's enough liquid, but if you think it's a little bit dry, which I think actually it is just a little bit dry, you can add a bit more milk to it, but I'm just going to add a little bit of water. So possibly just a tablespoon of water. You want a well-hydrated mixture. It doesn't have to be too sticky, because what you're going to do next is leave it in the bowl covered for about 4 hours to give the dough a chance to rehydrate, or hydrate, sorry, and rise. And you might find that it's actually risen double in its original size, which is good. That's what you want it to do. So put a lid on it, or you can put your bowl in a large plastic bag, or if you have a very large plate, you could put that on top. Put it in a warmish place and just let it rest for about 4 hours, and we'll see you later. So now the dough has risen and it's time to take it out, punch it down, give it a little bit of a knead, and then divide it into 2 tins. It's a bit sticky here. Let's put it on, scrape out all the dough. And put that to one side. I've got a little bit of flour to sprinkle on so it doesn't stick too much, but don't over flour your dough, otherwise it changes the, I don't know what it changes actually. Consistency. The consistency, thank you. I forgot my words there. So I'm just kneading this down. And then I'm going to divide it in 2 and work with each half separately. So get a knife. Cut the dough in half. Put one back in the bowl. I'm going to flatten it out. Roll it up. And I've got 2 tins here with a little bit of butter in each of them. So you want to spread that around in your tin. Pick up your dough and place it in your tin. Now, before I do the next one, I'll just rub the butter in the tin, have it ready. So you take your next bit of dough, press it down, roll it up. Tuck in the corners and place it in your loaf tin. So what I'm going to do next is get a tea cloth, cover it and put it in a warm place to rise and do its final proving, and that should take a couple of hours. Let me get a tea cloth. And we're finished. Okay, so the dough has risen. You only need it to rise just above the edge of the loaf pan. Don't let it rise too much because you can overproof bread dough and then it can suddenly collapse, but this is just about right. And you want to preheat your oven to 220 degrees centigrade, which is, I'll put the Fahrenheit equivalent just above me. And before you put it in the oven, it's a good idea just to score the top of the loaf to release some of the tension when it rises one last time in the oven. So I've just taken a very sharp knife and I've just run it across the top. There are special tools you can get which have like little razor blades in it that you just score the top. And that'll just help the dough to kind of open up. Right, so my oven has been preheating and I'm going to put it in for 30 minutes. Now your oven might vary, so I would say between 30 to 35 minutes. It should look quite golden brown on top. And we'll see you when it's ready. Ready to come out. Now there's one last thing to do to make these really easy to cut into, because they're quite hard to begin with when you take them out, and that is to cover it with your tea towel and let it steam as it cools, and don't cut it until it has cooled off. Okay, so the bread's been cooling for a couple of hours now, and I think it's ready to cut. Let's try some. Let's go for this one here. It smells delicious. That there. Delicious. I think one of the cats wants to come in. So that came out quite nice. So now that we're done, have a go at making your own bread using any leftover or surplus milk that you've got. I think you'll find it's really tasty and makes delicious toast. Thank you for watching Sew, Grow and Cook.